Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Evelyn, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend some time with me today. If this is your first time here, welcome to my little corner of the internet where we share real stories, real struggles, and real healing. And if you're part of my wonderful community already, thank you for coming back. Before we dive into today's story, would you do me a small favor? If you find value in what I share, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to me, and it helps me reach others who might need to hear these stories too. Now, I have to tell you something that happened to me just 2 years ago, something that shattered my faith in people, but ultimately taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. It's about trust, vulnerability, and how sometimes the people who seem like angels can turn out to be wolves in disguise. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please drop a comment below and tell me your city or country. I'll do my best to say hello to everyone. Your support means everything to me, and knowing we're connected across the globe makes this story even more meaningful to share. You know, at 62, I thought I had life figured out. I'd raised 3 beautiful children as a single mother after my husband passed when I was 45. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse for over 30 years, saved every penny I could, and finally, I was looking forward to a peaceful retirement in my little house in Ohio. But life, as I've learned, has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a Tuesday morning in March 2023. I remember because I was making my famous blueberry pancakes, the ones my grandchildren always beg for when they visit. The morning sun was streaming through my kitchen window, and I was humming an old song my mother used to sing. Then, suddenly, the world tilted. The last thing I remember clearly was reaching for the maple syrup on the top shelf. Then there was this crushing pain in my chest, like someone had placed a boulder on my ribcage. The kitchen floor came rushing up to meet me, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was surrounded by the sterile white walls of St. Mary's Hospital, machines beeping around me like some sort of medical orchestra. The fluorescent lights were too bright, making my eyes water, and there was this antiseptic smell that, even after 30 years in nursing, still made my stomach turn. Dr. Richardson, a kind man with silver hair and gentle eyes, delivered the news that would change everything. I'd suffered a major heart attack. The medical term he used was acute myocardial infarction, but all I heard was that my heart, this organ that had carried me through decades of life, love, and loss, had betrayed me. "Margaret," he said, his voice soft but serious, "you're going to need surgery. A triple bypass. Your arteries are severely blocked, and without this procedure, I'm afraid." He didn't need to finish. I was a nurse. I knew exactly what he meant. The surgery was scheduled for the following week, which meant I'd be in the hospital for an extended stay. As I lay there that first night, staring at the ceiling tiles and listening to the rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor, I felt more alone than I had in years. My children lived scattered across the country, Sarah in California, Michael in New York, and Jennifer in Florida. They'd all offered to fly in immediately, but I'd insisted they didn't need to disrupt their lives. "Mom's tough," I told them over the phone, forcing a smile they couldn't see. "I'll be fine." But lying there in that hospital bed, I didn't feel tough. I felt scared and vulnerable and desperately lonely. That's when I met her. Rebecca. She appeared on my second day, like something out of a movie. I was struggling to reach my water pitcher. My chest was still so sore from all the tests they'd run, when this gentle voice said, "Here, let me help you with that." I turned to see a woman about 35, with the most compassionate brown eyes I'd ever encountered. She had shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the light just right, and when she smiled, it was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. She was wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a soft pink sweater, so I knew she wasn't hospital staff. "I'm Rebecca," she said, carefully positioning the water pitcher within my reach. "I was visiting my aunt down the hall, and I noticed you seemed to be having some trouble." "That's very kind of you," I managed, surprised by how hoarse my voice sounded. "I'm Evelyn." "What a beautiful name," she said, and I could tell she meant it. My grandmother was named Evelyn. She was the strongest woman I ever knew. Something about the way she said it, with such genuine warmth, made my eyes well up with tears I'd been holding back since the ambulance ride. Maybe it was the medication, or maybe it was just the relief of having someone, anyone, show me a moment of human kindness, but I found myself opening up to this stranger. "I'm having surgery next week," I heard myself saying. "Heart surgery. And I'm terrified." Rebecca pulled the visitor's chair closer to my bed and sat down. "Tell me about it," she said simply. And so I did. I told her about the heart attack, about the upcoming surgery, about how my children wanted to come but I'd told them not to worry. I told her about being a widow, about the 30 years I'd spent as a nurse taking care of others, and how strange it felt to be the patient for once. Rebecca listened, really listened, in a way that few people do anymore. She didn't interrupt or try to fix anything. She just sat there, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding. When I finished talking, she reached over and gently took my hand. "Evelyn," she said, her eyes glistening with what I thought were tears of empathy, "you don't have to go through this alone. I know we just met, but something tells me we were meant to cross paths. Would it be okay if I visited you again tomorrow?" I squeezed her hand, feeling more grateful than I could express. "I would love that." Rebecca kept her word. She came back the next day, and the day after that. Each visit lasted longer than the previous one, and each time, I found myself looking forward to seeing her familiar face in my doorway. She had this way of making the sterile hospital room feel warmer just by being there. She'd bring little things, a magazine she thought I'd enjoy, some hand lotion that smelled like lavender, a small potted plant to brighten my windowsill. Nothing expensive, but everything chosen with such thoughtfulness that it made my heart ache with gratitude. "Tell me about your nursing career," she said during one visit, settling into what had become her chair beside my bed. 30 years, that's incredible. I found myself sharing stories I hadn't thought about in years. The difficult patients who'd taught me patience, the families I'd helped through their darkest hours, the colleagues who'd become like sisters to me. Rebecca hung on every word, asking thoughtful questions and sharing her own experiences. She told me she was a freelance graphic designer, recently divorced, with no children of her own. "I guess that's why I connect so well with people like you," she said. "People who've built something beautiful with their lives. I'm still figuring out what I want to build." I was touched by her vulnerability, and I found myself wanting to encourage her. "You're still young," I told her. "You have so much time to create whatever life you want." "That's exactly what my therapist says," she laughed, and I was impressed that she was so open about getting professional help. It spoke to her self-awareness and commitment to growth. The night before my surgery, I was a wreck. The pre-op medications were making me nauseous, and despite all my years in healthcare, I couldn't shake the statistics running through my head. The percentage of patients who didn't make it through triple bypass surgery, the risk of complications, the possibility that I might never wake up. Rebecca must have sensed my anxiety because she showed up that evening with a small gift bag. "I brought you something," she said, her voice gentle. "Open it." Inside was a small silver bracelet with a heart charm. It was simple but elegant, and clearly not inexpensive. "Rebecca, this is beautiful, but I can't accept." "Please," she interrupted, taking the bracelet from the box. "Let me put this on you. I want you to wear it during surgery tomorrow. Think of it as a reminder that someone is thinking about you, praying for you, sending you all the strength and love they can." As she fastened the clasp around my wrist, I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. "Why are you being so kind to me? You barely know me." She looked up from the bracelet, and her eyes were shining with tears too. "Because everyone deserves to have someone in their corner, Margaret. And right now, I'm in yours." That night, I slept better than I had since arriving at the hospital. The surgery went well, better than expected, Dr. Richardson told me when I woke up in the cardiac ICU. The procedure had taken 4 hours, but they'd successfully bypassed all 3 blocked arteries. "My heart," he said with a smile, "should serve me well for many years to come." Rebecca was there when I woke up, holding my hand and whispering words of encouragement. I was so groggy from the anesthesia that everything felt dreamlike, but I distinctly remember the comfort of her presence. "You did it," she kept saying. "You're going to be okay." Over the next week, as I slowly recovered in the cardiac unit, Rebecca became my constant companion. She was there when the physical therapist came to help me walk for the first time after surgery, cheering me on as I shuffled down the hallway with my walker. She was there when I had my first real meal post-surgery, making jokes that had me laughing despite the pain in my chest. She was there during the long, boring hours when daytime TV became mind-numbing, reading to me from books she'd brought from the library. The nursing staff began to recognize her as Evelyn's daughter, a mistake we never corrected because, honestly, it felt nice to have someone filling that role. My actual children called daily, but Rebecca was there, physically present in a way that mattered more than I could have imagined. It was during this recovery period that Rebecca began to share more personal details about her life. She told me about her difficult divorce, how her ex-husband had left her with significant debt and a damaged credit score. She talked about her struggle to build her graphic design business, how feast or famine freelance work made it hard to plan for the future. "I'm actually facing eviction from my apartment," she confided one afternoon, her voice heavy with shame. "I fell behind on rent during my divorce, and my landlord has run out of patience. I've been staying at different friends' houses, but I can't do that forever. My heart went out to her. Here was this woman who had been such a source of strength for me, and she was dealing with her own crisis. I wanted to help, but I was still in the hospital, limited in what I could do. What about your family? I asked. Can they help? She shook her head sadly. My parents passed away a few years ago, and I'm an only child. The few friends I have are struggling too. That's just life these days, you know? I did know. I'd seen so many patients over the years who were dealing with financial stress on top of health crises. It was heartbreaking how often the two went hand in hand. Rebecca, I said, reaching for her hand, when I get out of here, maybe there's something I can do to help. I'm not wealthy, but I have some savings. She immediately shook her head. Oh no, Margaret. I could never accept money from you. You've already given me so much just by letting me be part of your recovery. What have I given you? I asked, genuinely confused. Purpose, she said simply. For the first time since my divorce, I feel like I'm making a difference in someone's life. Being here with you, helping you through this, it's reminded me of who I want to be. After 10 days in the hospital, Dr. Richardson finally cleared me to go home. I was excited but nervous. The hospital had become a cocoon of safety, with medical professionals always nearby and machines monitoring my every heartbeat. Going home meant taking responsibility for my own recovery, and that felt overwhelming. Rebecca offered to drive me home and stay for a few hours to help me get settled. I gratefully accepted. My house felt strange after being away, everything exactly as I'd left it, but somehow different. The blueberry pancake batter was still in a bowl on the counter, now moldy and gross. Seeing it made the whole experience feel surreal. Rebecca immediately took charge, cleaning up the kitchen, making sure I had everything I needed within easy reach, and helping me organize my medications. She'd clearly thought this through, bringing groceries she'd picked up on the way and preparing a simple, heart-healthy dinner for us to share. You shouldn't be alone your first night home, she said as we ate the delicious soup she'd made. What if something happens? I assured her I'd be fine, but she insisted on staying overnight, sleeping on my couch, just in case. I was touched by her concern and honestly relieved to have the company. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became a regular presence in my life. She'd stop by every few days, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just checking in. She'd help with household tasks that were still difficult for me, changing sheets, doing laundry, reaching things on high shelves. She never asked for anything in return, and she always refused my offers to pay her for gas or food. It was during this period that our friendship deepened in ways I hadn't experienced since my husband died. We'd sit on my porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her dreams of expanding her design business, maybe even writing a book someday. I shared memories of my late husband, stories about raising my children, reflections on my nursing career. You know, I told her one evening as we watched the sunset, I was so worried about being a burden on my children. But having you here, it's shown me that accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. It's just part of being human. She squeezed my hand. I'm glad I can be here for you, Margaret. You become like family to me. Family. The word warmed my heart in a way I hadn't expected. About a month after I'd come home from the hospital, Rebecca's housing situation reached a crisis point. She came to my door one evening, clearly upset, with red eyes that suggested she'd been crying. Margaret, I hate to bother you with this, she began, her voice shaking, but I don't know where else to turn. She told me that her landlord had filed for eviction and given her 3 days to move out. The friends she'd been staying with could no longer accommodate her, and she was essentially homeless. She'd spent the day looking at apartments, but without steady income documentation and with her poor credit, no one would rent to her. I have a job prospect, she said, wringing her hands. A potential client wants to hire me for a big project, website design for their whole company. It would pay enough to get me back on my feet, but they need me to start immediately, and I need a stable address to put on the contract. I listened to her story with growing concern. This woman who had been my angel during the darkest period of my life was facing her own crisis, and I felt powerless to help in any meaningful way. What if you stayed here? The words came out of my mouth before I'd fully thought them through. Just temporarily, until you get back on your feet? Rebecca's eyes widened. Margaret, I couldn't possibly. Why not? I found myself warming to the idea. I have a whole guest room that never gets used. You've been taking care of me, this way we could take care of each other. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her wrestling with the decision. Finally, she spoke. If I stayed here, I'd want to contribute. I could help with groceries, utilities, housework, whatever you need. We'll figure it out as we go, I assured her. The important thing is that you have a safe place to stay while you get this job sorted out. That weekend, Rebecca moved into my guest room. She didn't have much, a few boxes of clothes, her computer equipment, some personal items. It struck me how little she owned for someone in her 30s, and it reinforced my sense that she'd really been through a difficult time. Having her in the house was wonderful. For the first time since my husband died, I wasn't coming home to empty rooms and silence. Rebecca was respectful of my space but warm and engaging when we were together. She cooked healthy meals that were good for my heart condition, helped with cleaning, and provided the kind of companionship I hadn't realized I was missing. For 2 months, our arrangement worked beautifully. Rebecca landed the web design contract she'd mentioned, and several smaller projects followed. She was talented, I could see that from the work she showed me on her laptop, and she had a good head for business. She insisted on contributing to household expenses, though I tried to refuse her money. "You're letting me live here rent-free," she said firmly. "The least I can do is help with groceries and utilities." We fell into comfortable routines. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks around the neighborhood as my strength returned, weekend trips to the farmer's market. Rebecca introduced me to new restaurants and activities I might never have tried on my own. She encouraged me to reconnect with old friends I'd lost touch with and even convinced me to join a book club at the local library. "You're good for me," I told her one evening as we worked together in the garden, planting flowers for spring. I was getting set in my ways, becoming too much of a hermit. "You're good for me too," she replied, not looking up from the seedlings she was carefully placing in the soil. "Living here has given me stability I haven't had in years. I'm finally able to focus on building my business instead of just surviving day to day." It was true. I could see the positive changes in her. She seemed more confident, more settled. Her client base was growing, and she was starting to talk about long-term plans for her business. That's why I was so receptive when she came to me with a business opportunity. "Margaret, I need to run something by you," Rebecca said one evening in late June. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, and she had a folder of papers in her lap. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" She opened the folder and spread several documents across the coffee table. "Remember I told you about that big client who hired me for the website project? Well, they've been so happy with my work that they want to expand our relationship." She explained that the client was a growing technology company that needed help with all their marketing materials, not just web design, but brochures, advertisements, trade show displays, the whole package. It was potentially worth tens of thousands of dollars in contracts over the next year. "The only problem," she continued, "is that they need me to invest in some specialized software and equipment to handle projects at their scale. High-end design software licenses, a professional-grade printer, better computer equipment. It's a significant upfront cost, but the contracts they're offering would pay for it many times over." She showed me the paperwork, what looked like official contracts and estimates from software vendors and equipment suppliers. The total investment needed was $15,000. "I've been trying to get a business loan," she said, "but with my credit history from the divorce, banks won't lend to me." I was wondering. She paused, looking uncomfortable. "Would you consider partnering with me on this? As an investment, I mean. I'd pay you back with interest once the contracts start paying out." I looked through the papers she'd shown me. Everything looked legitimate, and the potential returns she was projecting seemed reasonable for a growing business. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. $15,000, she said quietly. "I know it's a lot to ask." "Rebecca," I interrupted, "after everything you've done for me, everything you continue to do, this isn't just an investment in your business. It's an investment in our friendship, in the life we're building together." Her eyes filled with tears. "Margaret, you don't know how much this means to me. This could change everything." That weekend, we went to my bank together. I withdrew $15,000 from my savings account, money I'd been planning to leave to my children, but money I could afford to invest in Rebecca's future. Watching her face light up as we left the bank, I felt like I was doing something truly meaningful with my retirement funds. The first sign that something was wrong came about 3 weeks after I'd given Rebecca the money. She'd been working constantly, often late into the night on her computer, and she seemed stressed in a way I hadn't seen before. "How's the project going?" I asked one morning over coffee. "Oh, it's challenging," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The client keeps changing their requirements. You know how it is with big companies. Everything has to go through committees, and everyone has opinions." I nodded sympathetically, but something felt off about her response. In my experience, people usually got more animated when talking about work challenges, especially when they were passionate about their business. Rebecca seemed deflated, almost evasive. A few days later, I noticed she'd been receiving a lot of phone calls that she'd take in private, stepping outside or going to her room. When I mentioned it casually, She explained that they were client calls about confidential business matters. I have to be careful about proprietary information, she said. These companies are very strict about privacy. That made sense, but it still felt different from how she'd shared her work excitement before. The real red flag came when I offered to help her celebrate landing such a big contract. We should go out to dinner, I suggested. My treat. I want to celebrate your success. Rebecca's reaction was strange. She became flustered, almost panicked. Oh, that's sweet, Margaret, but we can't celebrate yet. The contracts aren't. I mean, everything isn't finalized. We should wait until all the paperwork is completely done. When do you expect that to happen? I asked. Soon, she said vaguely. Very soon. These things just take time. But weeks passed, and Rebecca seemed to grow more anxious rather than more excited about her work. She was sleeping poorly. I could hear her moving around her room late at night. She'd started taking phone calls at odd hours, often speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The truth came crashing down on a Tuesday morning in August, almost exactly 5 months after I'd first met Rebecca in the hospital. I was expecting a visit from my daughter Sarah, who was flying in from California for a long weekend. I'd been looking forward to introducing her to Rebecca, to sharing how much this wonderful woman had meant to my recovery and my new lease on life. But when I went to wake Rebecca to let her know Sarah would be arriving soon, her room was empty. Not just empty, completely cleaned out. All her belongings were gone, as if she'd never lived there at all. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in her familiar handwriting. Dear Margaret, I'm sorry I had to leave this way, but something unexpected has come up with my family, and I need to relocate immediately. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I'll be in touch soon about the business investment. Love, Rebecca. I stared at that note for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Rebecca had told me she was an only child with no family. What family emergency could have required such a sudden departure? And why hadn't she said goodbye in person? A cold dread began settling in my stomach. I called the number I had for Rebecca, but it went straight to a voicemail box that was full. I tried texting, but the messages showed as undelivered. When Sarah arrived that afternoon, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, still holding Rebecca's note, trying to piece together what had happened. Mom, what's wrong? She asked immediately. You look like you've seen a ghost. I told Sarah everything, about meeting Rebecca in the hospital, about her moving in, about the business investment I'd made. As I spoke, I watched my daughter's expression change from confusion to concern to alarm. Mom, Sarah said gently, this doesn't sound right. Can you show me the paperwork from this investment? I retrieved the folder Rebecca had shown me, the contracts and estimates that had seemed so legitimate when she presented them. Sarah, who worked in finance, examined them carefully. Mom, she said after several minutes, her voice heavy with concern, these documents, they're not real. This letterhead is wrong. I know this software company, and this isn't how their contracts look. These equipment estimates are from websites that don't exist. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you saying? I think Rebecca has been scamming you, Sarah said as gently as she could. Over the next few days, with Sarah's help, I began to uncover the full scope of Rebecca's deception. It was worse than I could have imagined. The business investment was just the beginning. Sarah insisted we check all my financial accounts, and that's when we discovered that Rebecca had somehow gained access to my banking information. Over the past month, there had been small withdrawals I hadn't noticed, $200 here, $500 there, always amounts small enough to escape immediate attention. How did she get your banking information? Sarah asked. I thought back to the weeks Rebecca had lived with me, how helpful she'd been with everything, including organizing my medications and paperwork. She'd often helped me pay bills online, sitting beside me at my computer as I navigated banking websites. She was just being helpful, I said, feeling sick with the realization. I trusted her completely. But the financial theft was only part of it. Sarah did some online research and discovered that there was no Rebecca matching the description I'd given who worked as a freelance graphic designer in our area. The phone number I had for her was registered to a prepaid phone service. The address she'd given me for her previous apartment didn't exist. Mom, Sarah said carefully, I don't think Rebecca is even her real name. The woman I'd thought was my guardian angel, my dearest friend, the person who'd held my hand through the scariest time of my life, she was a complete fabrication. We filed a police report, but Officer Martinez, the detective assigned to my case, was not optimistic. These types of scams are becoming more common, he explained. Criminals target vulnerable people, often in hospitals, nursing homes, or other situations where they're isolated and scared. They build trust over weeks or months, then disappear with whatever they can steal. But she lived with me for months, I protested. She took care of me, cooked for me, became part of my life. How could someone fake all that? Officer Martinez's expression was sympathetic but grim. Ma'am, some of these people are very good at what they do. They study their targets, learn what they need to hear, become exactly the person you want them to be. It's not just theft, it's emotional manipulation on a professional level. The total amount stolen was $23,400, the $15,000 investment plus numerous smaller withdrawals over several weeks. It was a significant portion of my retirement savings, money I'd worked decades to accumulate. But the financial loss, devastating as it was, wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the betrayal, the complete violation of trust. Every memory I had of Rebecca, every kind gesture, every moment of companionship, every expression of care and affection, was now tainted with the knowledge that it had all been calculated, fake, designed to manipulate me. The weeks following Rebecca's disappearance were among the darkest of my life, and that's saying something considering I'd already survived my husband's death and a major heart attack. I felt stupid, gullible, naive. How could I, a woman who'd lived 6 decades and dealt with all kinds of people in my nursing career, have been so completely fooled? The shame was almost unbearable. I found myself replaying every interaction, every conversation, looking for signs I should have seen, red flags I should have noticed. Sarah stayed an extra week to help me process what had happened and to beef up my financial security. She changed all my passwords, set up fraud alerts on my accounts, and helped me understand how to better protect myself in the future. Mom, you're not stupid, she kept insisting. You're trusting and kind, and someone took advantage of those beautiful qualities. The fault is entirely theirs, not yours. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have known better. I stopped answering the phone unless I recognized the number. I avoided going out unnecessarily because I was terrified of being approached by strangers. I second-guessed every interaction, wondering if people had ulterior motives for being nice to me. My recovery from heart surgery, which had been going so well, suddenly stalled. The stress of the betrayal caused my blood pressure to spike. I had trouble sleeping, lost my appetite, and found myself back in the cardiologist's office more frequently than I'd been since immediately after my surgery. Mrs. Harrison, Dr. Richardson said during one visit, your physical healing is being impacted by emotional trauma. Have you considered speaking with a counselor? I had considered it, but I was embarrassed. How do you explain to a therapist that you let a stranger move into your home and steal from you? How do you admit that you'd been so desperately lonely that you'd mistaken manipulation for genuine friendship? But finally, with Sarah's encouragement, I made an appointment with Dr. Patricia Wells, a therapist who specialized in helping older adults who'd experienced fraud. Dr. Wells was nothing like I'd expected. She was probably in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and warm eyes behind stylish glasses. Her office was comfortable and welcoming, filled with plants and soft lighting that made it feel more like someone's living room than a clinical space. Margaret, she said after I'd stumbled through my story, what happened to you is called affinity fraud, and it's much more common than people realize. You're certainly not the first person to sit in that chair with a similar experience. She explained that criminals who target older adults often spend weeks or months building relationships with their victims. They're skilled at identifying people who are lonely, isolated, or going through difficult transitions, like recovering from illness or dealing with major life changes. Rebecca, or whoever she really was, chose you specifically, Dr. Wells explained. She observed you in the hospital, identified you as someone who was vulnerable and alone, and crafted an entire persona designed to appeal to your specific needs and personality. But it felt so real, I said, tears streaming down my face. The conversations we had, the way she seemed to care about me, how could all of that have been fake? Some of it probably wasn't entirely fake, Dr. Wells said gently. These people often use elements of their real personalities and genuine emotions to make their performances more convincing. Rebecca may have genuinely enjoyed your company, even as she was planning to steal from you. That's what makes this type of fraud so particularly devastating. It's not just theft, it's the violation of a real human connection. Over the following months, I met with Dr. Wells weekly, and slowly began to understand what had happened to me, not just the mechanics of the fraud, but the psychological and emotional components that had made me vulnerable. I learned that my reaction was normal. The shame, the self-blame, the difficulty trusting people afterward, these were all common responses to this type of victimization. Dr. Wells helped me understand that being trusting and kind weren't character flaws, even though someone had exploited those qualities. Margaret, she said during one particularly difficult session where I'd been beating myself up for being so stupid, if we lived in a world where being trusting and generous made you stupid, it would be a very cold, lonely world indeed. The problem isn't that you trusted someone who seemed worthy of trust. The problem is that there are people in the world who abuse that trust. Slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. About 6 months after Rebecca's disappearance, I got a call from Officer Martinez that I never expected. "Mrs. Harrison, we've arrested someone we believe was involved in your case," he said. A woman named Jennifer Cole was picked up in Florida running a similar scam on an elderly man there. When we searched her belongings, we found items that matched the description of things stolen from other victims, including a silver bracelet with a heart charm that you'd mentioned in your report. My breath caught. The bracelet, the one Rebecca had given me before my surgery, the one I'd worn as a symbol of her care and support. To learn that it was just another prop in her performance was somehow worse than learning about the money. "Will I get my money back?" I asked. "We're working on recovering as much as we can from all the victims," Officer Martinez said. "But I want to be honest with you, these people usually spend the money as quickly as they steal it. We'll do our best, but don't count on full recovery." Jennifer Cole, Rebecca's real name, was part of a larger operation that had been targeting elderly victims across multiple states. She'd been running cons like mine for over 3 years, with at least a dozen known victims. The police had evidence of her stealing more than $200,000 total from vulnerable people who'd thought they were helping a friend in need. When Jennifer's case went to court, I was asked to testify. I almost didn't do it. The thought of facing her again, of having to relive the whole experience in front of strangers, was terrifying. But Dr. Wells encouraged me to consider it as part of my healing process. "Facing her might help you reclaim some of your power," she said. "Right now, she exists in your mind as this larger-than-life figure who completely fooled you. Seeing her in handcuffs, in an orange jumpsuit, being held accountable for her crimes, that might help you remember that she's just a person who made terrible choices, not some criminal mastermind who outsmarted you." Dr. Wells was right. When I walked into that courtroom and saw Jennifer Cole sitting at the defendant's table, she looked smaller than I remembered. Older, tired, defeated. The woman who had seemed so confident and caring when she was Rebecca now appeared nervous and deflated. When I took the stand to give my victim impact statement, I looked directly at her. For just a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something I hadn't expected: shame. Real shame, not the manufactured emotions she'd used to manipulate me. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "Jennifer Cole didn't just steal money from me. She stole my sense of safety, my ability to trust, my faith in human kindness. She took advantage of me when I was at my most vulnerable, recovering from life-threatening surgery, scared and alone." I paused, looking at Jennifer again. She was staring down at her hands now. "But I want her to know something," I continued. "She may have taken my money, but she didn't take my spirit. She may have shaken my faith in people, but she didn't destroy it. I've learned to trust again, carefully, but I've learned. And I've discovered that for every Jennifer Cole in this world, there are dozens of genuinely good people who help without expecting anything in return." Jennifer was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all her victims. I eventually recovered about $8,000 of what she'd stolen from me, not everything, but more than I'd expected. The healing process took longer than I'd anticipated. It wasn't a straight line. There were setbacks, days when the shame and anger came flooding back, times when I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But slowly, with Dr. Wells' help and the support of my children, I began to rebuild my life. I started volunteering at the hospital where I'd met Rebecca, not as a way to relive the trauma, but as a way to reclaim that space. I worked with the volunteer coordinator to visit patients who didn't have family nearby, offering the genuine companionship that I'd thought Rebecca was providing me. "Mrs. Harrison," said one patient, an elderly gentleman named Robert who was recovering from hip surgery, "you have a gift for making people feel less alone." Those words meant more to me than he could have known. They reminded me that my instinct to connect with people, to offer care and support, wasn't a weakness to be ashamed of, it was a strength to be proud of. I also joined a support group for fraud victims, facilitated by the local senior center. Meeting other people who'd experienced similar betrayals helped me realize how common these crimes were and how little they reflected on the victim's intelligence or judgment. "These criminals are professionals," explained Janet, a retired teacher who'd lost $30,000 to a fake charity scam. "They study us, learn our vulnerabilities, practice their approaches. We're not stupid for falling for their lies. They're just very, very good at lying." Through the support group, I learned about warning signs I'd never known to look for. I also learned practical strategies for protecting myself while still remaining open to genuine connections with new people. One of the most important things I learned was the value of slow trust, the idea that real relationships build gradually over time, with consistent actions that match words. Jennifer had rushed our relationship, creating artificial intimacy and urgency that should have been red flags. About a year after Jennifer's arrest, I was at the grocery store when I ran into someone I recognized from my support group. A woman named Dorothy who'd been scammed by fake investment advisors who'd stolen her late husband's life insurance money. "Margaret," she called out as I was examining apples in the produce section. "How lovely to see you outside of group." Dorothy was in her 70s, with silver hair she wore in an elegant bob and the kind of genuine smile that reached her eyes, so different from Jennifer's practiced expressions of concern. "I was just thinking," Dorothy continued, "I'm making a big pot of soup today, and I always make too much. Would you like to come over for lunch?" No pressure. I know we're all careful about new relationships after what we've been through. I appreciated her acknowledgement of our shared wariness. It felt honest and safe in a way that Jennifer's immediate, intense friendship never had. "I'd like that," I said. "But only if you let me bring dessert." That lunch was the beginning of a friendship that developed slowly and naturally. Dorothy and I discovered we had similar interests: gardening, reading, old movies. But unlike my relationship with Jennifer, this one wasn't centered on crisis or need. We were just two women who enjoyed each other's company. Dorothy had also learned hard lessons about trust. She'd been widowed 3 years earlier and had been targeted by scammers who'd convinced her they were legitimate financial advisors recommended by her late husband's attorney. They'd stolen $45,000 before disappearing. "The thing is," Dorothy told me one afternoon as we worked in her garden, "I almost let them rob me of more than money. I almost let them convince me that I was too stupid to make my own decisions, too gullible to live independently." "What changed?" I asked. "I realized that being trusting isn't the same as being stupid," she said, echoing something Dr. Wells had told me. "And I decided I wasn't going to let criminals change who I am at my core. I'm a person who believes in helping others and giving people the benefit of the doubt. I'm just more careful now about how I do it." As the second anniversary of my heart attack approached, I found myself thinking about how much my life had changed, not just because of Jennifer's betrayal, but because of everything I'd learned in the process of healing from it. I'd started speaking at senior centers and community groups about fraud prevention, sharing my story as a way to help others avoid similar experiences. It was difficult at first, admitting publicly that I'd been victimized felt vulnerable and embarrassing. But the response was overwhelmingly positive. "Thank you for having the courage to share this," an elderly man said after one of my presentations. "My neighbor has been getting calls from someone claiming to be his grandson in jail, asking for bail money. After hearing your story, I'm going to encourage him to hang up and call his grandson directly." These presentations led to an opportunity one never could have imagined. The local police department asked me to help train officers on how to interact with fraud victims. Many victims, they explained, were too ashamed to report crimes or cooperate with investigations, and they thought my perspective might help officers understand the emotional impact of these crimes better. "Mrs. Harrison," said Detective Rodriguez during one training session, "can you explain to the officers why victims sometimes seem to defend their scammers, even after they know they've been lied to?" It was a good question, one I'd struggled with myself. Even after I knew Jennifer was a criminal, part of me had wanted to believe that some of our connection had been real. "When someone spends months building what feels like a genuine relationship with you," I explained, "it's hard to accept that absolutely everything was fake. Your mind wants to hold on to the belief that some of the care, some of the friendship, was real. It's easier psychologically to think you were partially fooled than completely fooled." I also explained how the shame of being victimized could make people reluctant to come forward. "You feel stupid, gullible, weak. The last thing you want is to have a police officer, or anyone else, confirm those feelings by treating you like you should have known better." The training sessions were eye-opening for everyone involved. Officers learned to approach fraud victims with more empathy and less judgment, while I gained a deeper understanding of how these crimes worked and how they could be prevented. 2.5 years after my heart attack, I was back in St. Mary's Hospital, not as a patient this time, but as a volunteer. I'd been working in the cardiac unit for 6 months, visiting patients who were facing the same fears and loneliness I'd experienced. It was during one of these visits that I met Eleanor, a woman about my age who just had bypass surgery. Like me, she was alone. Her only daughter lived overseas and couldn't travel due to her own health issues. "I'm scared," Eleanor admitted as I sat beside her bed, holding her hand the way Jennifer had once held mine. "Not just about the recovery, but about going home alone. What if something happens? What if I can't take care of myself?" I understood her fear completely. But this time, I was able to offer something Jennifer never could have: genuine support without ulterior motives. "Eleanor," I said, "would it help if I gave you my phone number? Not to replace medical care or family support, but just as someone who's been where you are right now." Over the following weeks, I checked in with Eleanor regularly. I helped her understand her medication regimen, accompanied her to follow-up appointments when she needed a ride, and most importantly, provided the reassurance that she was going to be okay. But I was careful this time. I didn't rush the relationship or create false intimacy. I didn't offer financial help or get involved in Eleanor's personal business beyond what she specifically asked for. I applied all the lessons I'd learned about healthy boundaries and gradual trust building. Eleanor's recovery went smoothly, and she regained her independence much faster than I had. 6 months later, she joined me as a hospital volunteer, wanting to pay forward the support she'd received. "Margaret," she said one day as we were leaving the hospital after our volunteer shift, "I can't imagine what I would have done without your help. You probably saved my life, not medically, but emotionally." Her words reminded me of something important. Jennifer may have exploited my desire to help people, but that desire itself wasn't wrong. Learning to help others safely and appropriately had been part of my healing process. As I approach my 65th birthday, I find myself reflecting on everything I've learned from this experience. The financial loss was significant. That $15,000 I never recovered represented months of careful saving, money I'd planned to leave to my children. But in many ways, the education I received was worth far more than what I lost. I learned about the psychology of manipulation, about how skilled criminals can exploit basic human needs for connection and purpose. I learned about the warning signs of fraud, the rushed intimacy, the manufactured crises, the isolation tactics that separate victims from their support systems. But I also learned about resilience, about the human capacity to heal from betrayal and rebuild trust. I learned that being victimized doesn't make you weak, and that recovering from victimization can actually make you stronger and wiser. Most importantly, I learned that genuine relationships exist in abundance if you know how to recognize them. Dorothy, Eleanor, the other members of my support group, the police officers I've trained, the patients I've visited, these connections have been real in ways that my relationship with Jennifer never was. Dr. Wells and I still meet occasionally, though not for therapy anymore, more as friends who've shared an important journey together. She recently told me something that stuck with me. "Margaret," she said, "you've taken one of the worst things that can happen to a person, a complete betrayal of trust, and transformed it into a source of strength and service to others. That's not just healing, that's growth." I've also reconnected with my children in deeper ways. The experience taught all of us about the importance of staying connected, of checking in regularly, of not assuming that independence means isolation. Sarah visits more often now, and we talk on the phone several times a week. Michael and Jennifer, yes, my daughter shares the same name as my scammer, which is still jarring sometimes, make more effort to include me in their lives despite the geographical distance. "Mom," Sarah said during her last visit, "I used to worry about you being too trusting. But watching how you've handled this whole situation, how you've helped other people learn from your experience, I realized that your trusting nature is one of your greatest strengths. You just needed to learn how to protect it better." If you're still watching, if you've stayed with me through this long and difficult story, I want to leave you with the most important things I've learned. First, if something like this has happened to you, please know that you are not alone and you are not stupid. These criminals are professionals who study their targets and craft their approaches carefully. Being victimized by them doesn't reflect on your intelligence or judgment, it reflects on their skills and your humanity. Second, don't let the actions of bad people change your fundamental nature. If you're someone who likes to help others, who trusts easily, who gives people the benefit of the doubt, those are beautiful qualities. Don't let criminals rob you of them along with your money. Just learn to express those qualities more safely. Third, healing is possible, but it takes time and often requires help. Don't try to process a major betrayal alone. Whether it's professional counseling, a support group, trusted friends, or family members, reach out for the support you need and deserve. Fourth, there are warning signs you can learn to recognize. Relationships that move too fast, people who isolate you from your support system, individuals who create urgency around financial decisions, anyone who discourages you from talking to others about your relationship with them. These are red flags worth paying attention to. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, genuine human connection is still possible and still worth pursuing. Yes, there are people like Jennifer in the world who will exploit your kindness. But there are many, many more people like Dorothy, Eleanor, Dr. Wells, and the countless others who've shown me real friendship and support over the past few years. The difference is that real relationships build slowly, with consistent actions over time. Real friends don't create artificial urgency or manufactured crises. Real friends encourage you to maintain your other relationships and make your own decisions. Real friends don't need your money to prove your friendship. I'm not the same person I was when I woke up in that hospital bed 3 years ago. I'm more careful now, but I don't think I'm more cynical. I still volunteer, still make new friends, still trust people, I just do it more thoughtfully. The silver bracelet Jennifer gave me before my surgery was returned to me as evidence after her trial. I could have thrown it away or sold it, but instead, I had it engraved with a message: trust wisely. I wear it sometimes as a reminder, not of betrayal, but of the lessons I've learned and the strength I've found. So that's my story, dear friends. It's not the story I planned to tell when I started thinking about my retirement years, but it's the story that life gave me, and I've tried to make something meaningful from it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share not just the painful parts, but also the healing, the growth, and the hope that came afterward. I see so many comments from people sharing their own experiences, some asking for advice, some offering support, some just needing to be heard. Please know that I read every single one, and while I can't respond to everyone individually, I want you to know that your words matter and your experiences matter. If this story has helped even one person recognize warning signs or avoid a similar situation, then sharing it was worth every difficult moment. If it's helped someone who's already been victimized feel less alone or less ashamed, then it's accomplished everything I hoped for. Before I sign off, remember what I said at the beginning. If you found value in this story, please subscribe to this channel. It helps me reach others who might benefit from hearing these experiences. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with people from all over the world who are part of this community we're building together. I'll be back soon with more stories, more conversations, and more opportunities to learn from each other. Until then, take care of yourselves, trust wisely, and remember that even after betrayal, even after loss, there is still so much goodness in this world worth believing in. Thank you for being part of my healing journey. Thank you for letting me be part of yours. With love and hope, Margaret.